My name is Liana Harwood, 27 years old. The morning my father asked me to reschedule my wedding, I remember staring at the backyard through my kitchen window, watching the early decorators string soft white lights between the trees. The sunlight made the petals on the table arrangements glow, and for a moment everything looked like peace. Delicate, calm, meaningful. But that serenity was such a lie. Underneath it all, I felt a slow, familiar tightening in my chest, the same kind of pressure I used to feel as a child whenever my father compared me to my older brother. My fiancé and I had gotten engaged 5 months ago. We never wanted anything extravagant, just a private, intimate wedding surrounded by close friends and family. 4 years of growing together. 4 years of carving out a love that felt safe and steady. And now we were finally sealing it on our anniversary. The quiet beauty of a backyard ceremony just made sense to both of us. We didn't need a grand venue. We wanted authenticity, warmth, and the comfort of home. But even a small wedding isn't something you can just move around. We had caterers booked, decorators scheduled rentals, delivered people who had lined up their own time to make ours special. So when my father first told me that he might not be able to make it, my stomach sank in a way I didn't want to acknowledge. He claimed he had a medical emergency, something vague and conveniently urgent. His voice shook on the phone, but not in the way someone would if they were sick or scared, more like he was trying to keep a story straight. And something about that tone made all my childhood memories of him rushing to defend my brother resurface. I remember gripping the phone tighter. "Dad, what medical emergency lasts exactly a week?" He hesitated. That hesitation was everything. I pushed harder because I needed the truth more than I needed the comfort of a lie. And finally he cracked. His sigh was long, exhausting, almost annoyed, like I was the one who'd forced him into a corner. He admitted that my golden child brother Marcus had surprised him with a camping trip. The same Marcus who always dominated every room he stepped into, who carried himself with the confidence of someone who'd been told since birth that the world bent for him. The same brother who returned once a year, sweeping in like some beloved hero. The same brother my father never said no to. I could feel my pulse thudding in my ears as he spoke, because while the reason was absurd, the core of it wasn't surprising at all. It was just the same story I'd lived through for 27 years, me, quietly getting pushed aside, and Marcus standing on the tallest pedestal, unshakable. "So you want me to reschedule my wedding for a camping trip?" I asked, incredulous. "It's not a big wedding, Liana," he said, sounding impatient, like I was being unreasonable. "You just call a few people, talk to the vendors. It's not like you're hosting hundreds of guests." The words hit me like a slap, subtle but stinging, the kind of dismissal disguised as practicality. I tried explaining the significance of our date, how it was our anniversary, how this day meant something sacred to me. But the more I spoke, the more I realized his mind was already made up. He wasn't listening. He was waiting for me to stop talking. His choice was clear. It had always been clear. Marcus had been the golden child since we were little. 3 years older, infinitely more admired, forever placed on the highest shelf. He excelled at everything sports, academics, charisma. He soaked up praise like sunlight. Teachers adored him. Relatives bragged about him. Strangers gravitated toward him. And me, I grew up learning to exist in the spaces his shadow didn't reach. I wanted to be happy for him. I really did. But Marcus wasn't just privileged, he was insufferable. Arrogant, smug, aware of his status, and weaponizing it when convenient. He'd bully me when we were younger, then deny it with a charming smile that adults always believed. When he left for college, I felt relief. I still feel guilty for. But that wasn't the only reason my father and I had always been strained. Our parents divorced when I was in middle school, and it wasn't peaceful. My mother had an affair with an old college friend, an ugly truth that blew our household apart. The divorce was bitter, dragging, emotionally bloody. And even though my mother tried to stay connected, Marcus shut her out completely. In his black and white world, betrayal was unforgivable. And because my father and Marcus were so close, I think my father expected me to follow suit, to choose sides, to hate my mother for his sake. But I didn't. I couldn't. My mother had hurt the marriage, yes, but she had never stopped being my mom. She tried messily, imperfectly, desperately to keep her kids in her life. And she needed someone to respond, someone who didn't slam the door in her face. That someone was me. My father softened toward Marcus over time, but toward me, he hardened. Coldness settled into our interactions like frost. I think he resented the fact that I didn't burn my mother at the stake the way he hoped I would. Mom remarried months after the divorce, and Marcus refused to attend the wedding. I was a bridesmaid. Standing at her side felt right, even if confusing. She was flawed and complicated, but she loved me, and I loved her. That choice widened the divide between my father and me. Years later, losing Mom to cancer carved a hole in my life I still haven't filled. And even then, Marcus barely showed up, just enough to claim moral high ground, not enough to comfort her meaningfully. When he left for London after getting a job, my father turned his focus back to me. He apologized, truly apologized, for the years of distance and hurt. He admitted to favoring Marcus. He admitted he was wrong. For the first time, I felt like maybe we had a chance to build something real. That's why I'd asked him to walk me down the aisle. But here we were, my father choosing a camping trip over my wedding, over the moment I had dreamed of since childhood, over the gesture that symbolized healing in our fractured relationship. Something inside me cracked quietly but completely. After that call, after the shock and the anger and the humiliation settled, I did the only thing that made sense in that moment. I dialed another number 1 stored in my phone under a name that always gave me bittersweet comfort. My stepdad. My voice was still shaking when I asked, "Will you walk me down the aisle instead?" There was a pause, a soft, breathy hesitation. He knew my father was supposed to do it. He knew this could create conflict, but he also knew me well enough to hear the pain in my voice. When he finally said yes, something inside me steadied, and something else warned me that this choice would unravel more than I realized. The morning of my wedding was cool and quiet, the kind of stillness that makes every small sound feel louder. As I slipped into my dress, my hands trembled, not with nerves about marriage, but with the weight of everything that had happened in the last few days. I kept thinking of my father's voice on the phone, the strange calmness he'd used when he tried to convince me that rescheduling was not a big deal. It was like he genuinely believed my entire life should be flexible around Marcus's plans. But when my stepdad arrived at the house, dressed in a simple but elegant suit, something in me eased. He wasn't trying to replace anyone. He wasn't trying to compete. He was just there, present in a way my father never seemed capable of being unless Marcus was out of reach. When he walked into the room, he paused, his eyes widening for a second. He didn't gush or ramble or make a dramatic statement. He just nodded slowly and said, "You look beautiful, Liana," and that alone made my throat tighten. Outside, the backyard had been transformed into something magical. Lanterns hung from the branches. White chairs lined the aisle. Soft music drifted through the air. The guests murmured quietly, their faces glowing in the warm afternoon light. My fiancé stood under the arch nerves, visible in the way he shifted his weight, but his smile, steady loving, made everything worth it. My stepdad offered his arm, and for a moment I hesitated. Not because I doubted him, but because reality was catching up to me. My father should have been here. He should have been the one standing beside me. My chest ached with the kind of grief that doesn't belong on a wedding day. But I looped my arm through his anyway. As we started walking, the guests rose. Cameras clicked. The music swelled. I caught my cousin's eye. Briefly, she was the one instructed to take the photo I'd send to my father. I had told her to take it from my phone and send it immediately. It wasn't supposed to be petty or cruel, but as I walked forward feeling both loved and hollow, I wondered if maybe part of me did want him to feel what I'd felt the moment he chose Marcus over me. Halfway down the aisle, my stepdad whispered, "I'm honored you asked me." Those simple words nearly undid me. I blinked hard to keep from crying. I didn't want to enter my marriage in tears over the wrong man. The ceremony went beautifully soft laughter, heartfelt vows, a kiss that felt like the beginning of something steady and strong. For a while I forgot about the turmoil, the disappointment, the guilt. It was just me, my husband, and the warm embrace of the life we were building together. But the moment the ceremony ended and people began to move toward the tables for lunch, reality slipped back in. My cousin walked up holding my phone and said softly, "It's sent." I exhaled a long, shaky breath. Hours passed. Guests ate, chatted, took photos, hugged me. My husband squeezed my hand every few minutes, checking in without saying a word. Everything was beautiful, exactly what I'd wanted. But at the back of my mind, I kept thinking about my father, waiting for his reaction, waiting for that message, waiting for anything. Nothing came. It wasn't until around 8 in the evening, when most of the guests had left and the lanterns began to glow brighter in the dimming light, that a car pulled up abruptly outside the house. Not just any car, the one my brother always drove when he came home. I felt my stomach drop. My father stepped out first. His expression was exhausted, panicked and broken in a way I had never seen before. Marcus followed behind him, equally tired, but noticeably irritated, like he hated being dragged into this. My father walked straight toward me, ignoring everyone else. His voice cracked the moment he opened his mouth. "Liana, I'm so sorry." He didn't shout. He didn't defend himself. He didn't blame anyone. He just stood there, shaking slightly like the ground beneath him had given out. I froze because I wasn't expecting this. I thought he'd send a text or call or stay silent. I expected indifference, not desperation. He kept talking, his words stumbling out. "I didn't take your wedding seriously. I made a horrible mistake. I should have never asked you to reschedule. I was selfish, I was blind, and I was wrong." A part of me softened instinctively, but another part, the part he had carved over years of favoritism and neglect, did not. He looked at me with wide, pleading eyes. "Please, give me one more chance. Let me fix this. Let me walk you down the aisle. We can have another ceremony tomorrow. I'll arrange everything. I'll pay for it. It doesn't matter who shows up. I just need to do this for us." For a moment, the backyard noise faded completely. All I could hear was my own heartbeat. And then a thought surfaced, an uncomfortable, sharp one I didn't want to acknowledge. Would he have come back if my stepdad hadn't walked me down the aisle? So I asked him. His silence was immediate. His face shifted just slightly, but enough. Enough for me to see truth in the way he lowered his eyes, the way his lips trembled, the way Marcus's jaw tightened behind him. This wasn't about me. This was about being replaced. This was about pride. A wave of heat rushed through me. Anger, clarity, heartbreak, all tangled together. "You didn't come because of me," I said quietly. "You came because you couldn't stand that someone else did what you were supposed to do." He opened his mouth, but no words came out. That was all the confirmation I needed. I took a slow breath, keeping my voice steady. "You had your chance, Dad. You threw it away. And now I want peace. I want the rest of my wedding day to belong to me, not to your regrets." His eyes brimmed with tears, and when they spilled over, I was shocked by how much it shook me. I had never seen my father cry like that, frantic, ashamed unraveling. He choked out, "Please, Liana, don't do this." But I had spent too many years swallowing my own tears to be swayed by his now. "If you could treat me badly my whole life without any good reason," I said slowly, "then I have the right to walk away with plenty of reasons." And then I told him I wanted him to leave. He reached out like he wanted to grab my hand, but stopped himself. Marcus stood stiffly behind him, arms crossed, judging me silently. My father finally lowered his head, shoulders collapsing inward, and walked back to the car. His soft sobs trailed behind him like an echo I couldn't ignore. I didn't cry, not then. But when the door closed behind me and the porch lights flickered on, I felt something deep inside me shift, like the ending of a chapter I hadn't realized I'd been stuck in for years. The day after the wedding felt strangely quiet, almost hollow, like the air around me was waiting for something to crack. My husband and I spent the morning sorting through leftover flowers, uneaten desserts, and half-tangled lantern strings. It should have been peaceful, but every rustle of fabric and every clink of dishes reminded me of the night before, of my father standing in the backyard trembling, pleading, crying in a way I had never witnessed in my entire life. I kept seeing his face in flashes, the rawness, the disbelief, the panic that came too late. Still, I didn't regret my decision. Not yet. My husband wrapped his arm around me as we walked inside. "You don't have to fix anything right now," he murmured. "Enjoy today. Enjoy us." And I tried. I really did. But that evening when I checked my phone, I saw the first missed call. Then another, and another. My father's name filling the screen again and again, as if the phone itself was shaking with his desperation. I didn't answer. The calls continued for days, always at different times, always persistent. Then came the messages. At first, I didn't open a single one. I wasn't ready. I didn't want to read apologies written in the heat of guilt. I wanted distance, space to breathe, to feel something other than disappointment. By the third day of ignoring everything, my husband and I were boarding the plane for our honeymoon. A week away, just the two of us. No family, no guilt, no ghosts from old wounds haunting my wedding memories. On the flight, I finally turned my phone to silent, then off completely. For the first time in a long time, I felt like the world couldn't reach me. The first couple of days of our honeymoon were perfect. We explored local markets, walked along the beach at sunset, had quiet breakfasts on the balcony while the ocean breeze drifted in. There were moments where I almost forgot the tension waiting at home almost. But grief has a way of hiding under joy, pretending to be gone until you're quiet enough for it to whisper again. On our third morning, while my husband was in the shower, I finally cracked. I scrolled through my father's messages. There were dozens of them. Some long, some short, some fragmented, like he'd typed them through shaking hands. I'm so sorry, Liana. I know I failed you. I never meant to hurt you. Please talk to me. I love you. I want to fix this. I'll do anything. Just tell me you're okay. Please don't shut me out. The words blurred. I blinked until they steadied again. My chest felt tight, not with anger now, but with sadness so deep it surprised me. My father had always been a flawed man, stubborn, biased, blindly loyal to Marcus. But I had never seen him like this, never seen his walls crumble, never seen him this afraid of losing me. When my husband stepped out, towel around his shoulders, he saw me hunched over my phone, eyes glossy. He sat beside me and simply said, "Call him only if it's what you really want." So I did, not to reconcile, not to soothe him, just to tell him to stop. He answered on the first ring, Liana. His voice cracked like he'd been holding his breath for days. I inhaled slowly. Dad, I'm going on my honeymoon, and I need you to stop calling and texting me for a while. There was silence, heavy, stunned silence. I continued, I read your messages. I understand that you're sorry, but your constant apologies won't change what happened. They'll only keep reminding me of it. I need space. When I'm ready to talk, I'll reach out. Until then, please stop. He swallowed audibly. I understand, he said softly. I'll wait for you, sweetheart. Take all the time you need. His voice wasn't angry or defensive. It was tired, worn, but accepting. And that should have been the end of it. Except the universe never lets pain settle quietly. A few hours later, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. Without thinking, I answered and instantly regretted it. Marcus. Even hearing his breath on the line irritated me. Before I could hang up, he said sharply, "If you hang up, you'll just prove you're running away. Again." I froze. It was the same tone he used when we were teenagers, condescending, smug, intentionally poking at insecurities he'd memorized over the years. "What do you want?" I said, my voice clipped. "What I want," he began, irritation lacing every word, "is for you to stop treating Dad like garbage. He's miserable because you're being dramatic." I scoffed. "Marcus, do not start." "No," he snapped, cutting me off. "You've always been jealous of me. Always. That's why you're taking it out on Dad. You chose Mom over him during the divorce. You betrayed him. And now you're punishing him because you can't stand that he loves me more." Something in me turned cold. I had expected stupidity. I had expected arrogance. But I hadn't expected this childish delusion. "You know what's funny?" I said quietly. "You think this is about you. But it's not. It never has been. And the fact that you still believe everything revolves around you proves that Dad didn't fail. He created you exactly as he raised you." He inhaled sharply. "Don't play therapist, Liana. You're not good at it." "And you're not a grown man," I replied calmly. "You're a spiteful child trapped in an adult's body. No matter what you achieve, you'll always be emotionally stunted." His breathing grew harsher, angrier, but I didn't give him a chance to respond. "Arguing with you," I added, "would only prove my point. So goodbye, Marcus." And I hung up. My hands trembled afterward, not with fear, but with adrenaline and a strange, bittersweet triumph. It felt like finally shutting a door I'd been holding half open for far too long. For the rest of the trip, I kept my phone on airplane mode, except when absolutely necessary. No more calls, no more interruptions, no more emotional intrusions. For the first time in years, I felt like my peace belonged to me. Coming home from the honeymoon felt like stepping back into a life that had been paused mid-sentence. The suitcases were still half open in the hallway, sand clung stubbornly to the soles of our shoes, and the house smelled faintly of the flowers that had wilted while we were gone. My husband kissed my forehead before leaving for work that morning, his hand lingering at the side of my face, as if he could sense how heavy I felt inside. "You don't have to do anything today," he said softly. "Not unless you're ready." But I knew it was time. The silence between my father and me had stretched long enough. It wasn't healing anymore, just stagnant. And if I didn't face him, I knew the guilt, anger, and confusion would keep growing roots inside me. So after work, without telling anyone where I was going, I drove to his house. The familiar street made my chest ache. The same mailbox, the same cracked walkway, the same porch swing that had once been my safe place during summer nights. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. When my dad opened the door, he looked stunned. Not relieved, not eager, just stunned. As if he had prepared himself for months of silence, not days. His eyes softened instantly, and his shoulders dropped with a quiet exhale. "Liana," he whispered. Before he could say anything else, Marcus's voice echoed from inside. "Who is it?" He appeared behind my dad, leaning against the wall like he owned the house. Of course he was there. Of course he'd positioned himself like a guard dog, ready to insert himself where he didn't belong. I kept my expression neutral. I need to talk to Dad, in private. Marcus opened his mouth, clearly ready to protest, but my father raised a hand, something he almost never did with him. "Marcus, go to my room for a bit." The shock on my brother's face was almost comical. He wasn't used to being dismissed. For a second I thought he might argue, but my father's expression left no room for debate. With a dramatic sigh and one last irritated glance my way, he walked off. Only when his footsteps disappeared down the hallway did my father step aside to let me in. Inside, the house felt smaller than I remembered, dimmer, as if its walls had soaked up every argument, every strained moment, every hurt left unspoken. Family photos lined the entryway, pictures of birthdays, school events, vacations long before the divorce. Each one a reminder of a time when things looked happy, even if they weren't. We sat in the living room facing each other like two people trying to read a language they used to speak fluently, but had forgotten over time. He clasped his hands in front of him, staring down for a long moment. "I didn't think you'd come." "I know," I said. "I almost didn't." He winced. For once I didn't soften. I couldn't. "Dad." I started slowly choosing my words carefully. I was really disappointed. I thought things were finally better between us. For the last couple of years, we were actually getting along. I felt like you were trying. He stayed silent, eyes fixed on the carpet. "And then you asked me to reschedule my wedding. Not for something important, not for something unavoidable, but for a camping trip." His breath hitched slightly, but he didn't interrupt. "That day, I realized your priorities hadn't changed. Marcus still comes first. I only matter when he's not here." He lifted his gaze, and for the first time I saw something raw, shame, tangled with regret. "Liana, that's not true." "It is," I said firmly. At least it felt true to me. He opened his mouth again, but I kept going. I needed to say it while my courage held. I know I was petty. Asking my stepdad to walk me down the aisle wasn't the mature thing to do. But he's someone who's always been there for me in ways you weren't. He stepped up during the hardest moment of my life when Mom died. And you barely looked at me that whole week. His face crumpled. I was grieving too. "I know," I whispered, "but so was I. And you didn't see me." His voice broke. "I know that now, and it hurts every day." We sat in a long, heavy silence. Outside, a car drove by. Somewhere down the hall, Marcus shifted loudly and patiently. But inside this room, everything felt suspended like a delicate thread stretched between us. I took a slow breath. "Dad, I still don't know why you really came back the night of my wedding. Was it because of me, or because you didn't want my stepdad to replace you?" He looked up sharply, pain flickering in his eyes. For a moment, he didn't speak. His throat moved like he was trying to swallow something difficult. Finally, he whispered, "I came back because I panicked. I realized too late what I had done. And yes, seeing your stepdad in that picture hurt, but not because he replaced me. Because I realized how easily I had given up my place. I didn't know what to do with that truth. I didn't know whether to feel satisfied or sad. Maybe both." I leaned back slightly, letting his words settle between us like dust in the light. "It doesn't matter anymore," I said quietly. "What's done is done." He nodded slowly, his eyes glistening. "So what now?" he asked, voice trembling. "Do you want me out of your life? Do you want to cut ties?" I shook my head. "No, I don't want to lose you. I've already lost Mom. I know how fast life changes. I can't pretend you haven't been important to me, even if it's complicated." His shoulders sagged with relief, but I wasn't finished. "However," I added, "I need space. Real space. I need time to heal from all of this. Maybe weeks, maybe months, maybe more. I don't know yet." He looked terrified, like he was afraid time would turn my distance into disappearance. "Can you give me that?" I asked softly. He nodded instantly, as if grateful for any terms I was willing to offer. "Yes, anything. Anything you need." Something warm and painful twisted in my chest. He reached out tentatively. "Can I hug you before you go?" I hesitated just a second, long enough to feel the weight of the years between us, then nodded. When he wrapped his arms around me, his body shook faintly. I could feel his breath hitch, feel the way he held on just a little too tightly, like he was afraid I would vanish if he loosened even an inch. I didn't cry. Not until I was back in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel, the house shrinking in my rearview mirror. Then the tears fell slow, quiet, and necessary. The next morning felt different. Not lighter, just different. like the world had shifted a few degrees overnight and I was still trying to regain my footing. My father and I now had an agreement, a fragile, trembling line drawn in pencil. Space, time, distance, a chance to breathe. I didn't tell anyone at first, not even my husband, not because I wanted to keep secrets, but because I needed to sit with the decision before saying it out loud. Words once spoken become real in a way thoughts never do. My husband came home in the afternoon with takeout from my favorite restaurant, smiling as if he sensed I needed familiarity. "How did it go?" he asked gently, rubbing my shoulder as I unpacked the containers. I told him the truth, that it had been emotional, complicated, and painful, but necessary. I told him I had set boundaries, and that my father agreed. His eyes softened with something like pride. He kissed the top of my head and said, "I'm glad you're protecting your peace." Peace. The word sounded strange, like a language I was relearning. Later that night, I called my stepdad. I didn't want him to hear from my father first, or through Marcus's distorted version of events. I owed him that much. When he picked up, his voice was warm and familiar, carrying the calmness that always grounded me. "I talked to Dad today," I told him. A soft sigh. "How did it go?" "Better than I expected. Worse than I hoped. But we came to a decision." I told him I wanted to go low contact for a while. "That sounds fair," he said gently, "and healthy." There was a pause, and then I confessed something that had been quietly gnawing at me. I felt guilty for asking you to walk me down the aisle. Sometimes I wonder if I used you to hurt him, even if I didn't want to admit it. My stepdad chuckled softly, kindly, not mockingly. "Liana, the only thing that matters is you thought of me. After your father, you thought of me. That's enough. That means something." His words settled over me with the same warmth they always carried. "Thank you," I whispered. "You don't owe me thanks. You called me for one of the biggest moments of your life. That's all the validation I need." When we hung up, I felt something loosen in my chest, something guilt had been tightening for days. The following morning, I woke up to a house still quiet with post-honeymoon stillness. The laundry wasn't done. Half the souvenirs were still in bags, and my suitcase sat open in the hallway like a reminder of unfinished transitions. But none of that bothered me. Life, I realized, didn't have to be tidy to be stable. My phone buzzed a few times throughout the day, but true to his word, none of the messages were from my father. No missed calls, no desperate apologies, no lingering presence in the shadows of my notifications. Just silence. Respectful, painful silence. It felt strange. I hadn't realized how much I had braced myself for his constant presence until it vanished. Later that afternoon, I sat on the back porch with a cup of tea, looking out at the same backyard where I had said my vows. The lanterns were gone, the chairs folded, the arch dismantled. But I still remembered the glow of the warm lights, the hush of the guests when I walked down the aisle, the way the air felt thick with something both tender and bittersweet. I closed my eyes and imagined my father there, what it would have been like if he had walked me down the aisle the way we both once imagined, what it would have meant, how it could have rewritten the ending of our story. But imagining doesn't change reality. And reality was this: my father had made choices that hurt me. I had made choices that hurt him back, and we both had to live with the consequences. That didn't mean we were done forever. It just meant the next chapter had to be written slowly, carefully, with both of us finally acknowledging the fractures we had ignored for too long. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in soft oranges and pinks, I thought of my mother. I wondered what she would say if she were here, whether she'd scold me for being harsh, or take my side without hesitation, or remind me that love isn't a single grand gesture, but 1,000 small ones. I wish she could have been at the wedding. I wish she could have seen me happy. I wish she could have hugged me through the chaos. But grief is a quiet companion, one that doesn't leave, even when life moves on. My husband stepped outside, then wrapping his arms around my shoulders as he sat beside me. He rested his chin lightly on my head, thinking about things. Thinking about everything, I murmured. He squeezed me gently. "Whatever happens next, you don't have to do it alone." And I believed him. Because even though my family was fractured and complicated, even though healing would be slow and uneven, even though the past still clung to me like dried paint, I was building something new, something healthier, something intentional. Maybe someday my father and I would sit together without pain pulsing between us. Maybe someday he'd understand that love isn't shown through grand gestures but through consistency. And maybe someday I'd find the courage to let him all the way in again. But for now, distance was the right choice. A breeze rustled the trees above us. The last light of the day turned everything gold. And as I leaned my head on my husband's shoulder, I felt a fragile, hopeful truth settle quietly inside me. I can't change the family I was born into, but I can choose the family I build from here on out. And that choice finally blessedly felt like peace.